the $3 dip, size 18, 2.0 millimeter gold tungsten bead, a little bit of small gold wire for the rib, and this one's going to be tied in a wine colored thread, which will make up the body. And then a little deer hair tuft for a wing on top. Okay, let's take that out of the vise. I have already placed a bead on this hook for sake of saving a little bit of time on the video. Put your hook in your vise. Now I'll start some thread. I'm going to shorten up my bobbin and not waste so much. Now behind the bead I'm going to wrap forward 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and then come back over those same wraps. 1, 2, 3. That is enough for me to pop that thread or yank this hook right out of the hook shank, or out of the hook vise, excuse me. So that's really all you need to start thread if you're starting in a tight spot. Okay. We are going to be using some gold small wire as the ribbing and reinforcing that thread body as stated earlier. So I want a nice uncorded up thread. So if your bobbin's still spinning like crazy, spin it a little faster, stop it until it's kind of hanging steady. And then I'm going to only give an inch of working thread. Okay, that will let me place inch or less. Basically lock that in right where I want to, that gold wire. And doing my best just to kind of keep touching turns, keeping that wire on top so my body's somewhat even. That looks good. And start coming back up once you get a little ways around the bend. Leave enough room around that hook bend for the fish's mouths for hooking power and retention when you catch a fish. Okay, once I've made it all the way back up with touching turns, I'm going to go counterclockwise spin again, uncord the thread. This is a uni thread, so it is more of a rounded thread than a flat thread. Say like a UTC 70 denier would probably be the ultimate. If I had it in this color, I would be tying it with that on this small of a hook size. But now I'm going to go touching turns back. However, I'm not going to go back all the way because I want to create that taper. So I'm only going to go about 2/3 and then back up again. Okay, and I'm going to let it fall one more wrap right in that little space. You'll notice I left a space behind this bead. It's a little loose still. I've got a little room up there at the head. I wanted that because, for one, I'm using a larger thread than I would like to on this size of a hook. Okay, and I want room to tie in that head, that little deer hair wing. For two, when I pull in that deer hair, when I pull that straight down, it's going to help it flare up and stand up for me. So this is kind of a two-way street. Normally you get away with, and you can just tuck the wire right in the bead of the hook and it helps stabilize it. But in this case, I wanted a little bit of room. Alright, so let's grab this gold wire. First turn should be right at the back of that thread that you've ended down the curved shank. And then we're going to palmer, nice and even turns, nice and tight, forward until we get up to there where the thread is waiting. 2, 3, and now I never let off tension, it's still tight right here. Helicopter, that pops off clean, no edge to cut. Okay, easiest way to do that with wire. I've still got a little bit of room. Bead isn't all packed in there too tight, so I've got some room now for my deer hair. A lot of people use bleached hair. You can use elk or deer, really. This is just a cheap patch of deer hair that I'm not worried about the quality, because you'll see why. We're just going to give it a little butcher anyway. So less is more on this fly. Do not get too big of a clump. Just cut just a small little tuft of maybe, I don't know, 10 hairs or so, and clean out the under fluff. You're not going to need to stack it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I am going to tie these in tips first. You don't have to, but I am going to, so that I have something that's easy to grab when I trim these away. So right on top of the hook shank, pinching these fairly tight, I'm going to open up my fingers just a little bit in the front so that I can pinch and loop my thread. See that? Straight down. Once the thread pulls down, bring it up, tighten, pinch, loop, tighten. Okay, you can see that's slightly stood up that deer hair like I was talking about. Okay, now I'm going to want to just go through with a couple more turns, grabbing a few fibers at a time, continuing to move forward, and then pulling in tight, continuing to move forward, pulling in tight, and then grabbing the rest and pulling in tight. The reason we kind of staggered our way through that thread like that is because it helps eliminate the deer hair from wanting to spin around the hook shank, which on some flies is exactly what you want, but on this fly we don't. We want it to stay on top. Okay, so now I haven't over bulked my head, and especially with this size of thread that I'm using, I'm just going to go ahead and with a nice flat thread, my bobbin was no longer spinning like crazy. I'm going to go ahead and tuck in 1, 2, 3, and I'm just judging by the little collar and how much space I have behind that bead. I'm going to give it one more in this case, and whip finish, pull that tight. The trick is when you're tying is just to not overdo it. You see I've got a little color, a little collar behind there, but I'm not so big it's going to come, furling off the front of the bead or making a big ugly scene. So right now, the last 2 steps, lift these fibers, grab your tips. Doesn't have to be perfect. If some are in front and some are behind, it's not a big deal. So grab the most of your tips there. Hold them straight up and a little bit forward, at a little angle, nice and tight. Just give yourself a little chop like that. Okay? There's that one. No big deal. Now, I'm going to lift the back ones up, lay my bottom of my scissors right there about 2/3 down that hook shank, and make a quick trim. 2 cuts really is all you need when you start to get used to it. Sometimes you'll get a hair flaring out and you'll need to trim some away, but if you notice, I've avoided getting the hair wrapped around the hook shank. Okay, it stayed on top, and that's what I want. Okay, I've kept the hair sparse enough to not be too bulky up here and to make it float like a cork. I still want it to get underneath the water and get down there where most of the fish are feeding. And that's pretty much it. On a fly like this, you can benefit from a little head cement, so I've got a little drop of runny stuff here on my bodkin. I'm going to set it there, run it there, and let it suck and absorb right into those last 3 wraps. And that's it. That's a $3 dip.